I've been playing through the main scenario questline for Dawntrail for the past couple of weeks, taking in the sights, the sounds, and the stories, and while I know the reception seems to be mixed, I loved it. I had a blast with the summer vacation, with this new beginning after the reality-shattering finale of Endwalker, and the little trips to the Final Fantasy XIV abyss of the patch content. Is the MSQ perfect? No, not even close, but overall my thoughts are positive. I had fun playing the MSQ, interacting with the characters, new and old, main and secondary. I liked the stories in each chapter or zone, and overall I thought the plot was fine, and it was a good setup for things to come. We got a bunch of new places and peoples, new concepts to toy with, new mysteries to resolve, and my desire to log in every day has been revitalized. Right now, even as I write this, I'm obsessed once more with leveling all my crafting and gathering, finishing the deliveries questlines, with eyes to move to the other jobs and their role questlines. Plus raids, there's a lot of stuff coming and I'm here for it all. Now, before I go any further, this video is just about the MSQ. I have yet to finish the other quests, the role quest and the deliveries. In addition to that, I want to point out a couple of things. Let's call them disclaimers. These are things that colored my perception and my experience. Number one, I knew what I was getting into. From the last patch of Endwalker, I already knew what kind of story we'd be telling. At least for the first chunk of it, the Rite of Succession. I was well aware that Wuk Lamat would be the central character and we'd be her backup. I knew it and I was fine with it, still am. Also, I knew from the interviews done with the devs that Dawntrail was likely going to be highly experimental in nature, not just in gameplay but in storytelling. And I wasn't expecting a sweeping epic like Endwalker. I knew this was a setup for a new set of stories. This was going to be Square Enix basically throwing crap at the wall and seeing what sticks. So I'm remaining open-minded and letting go of a lot of things I would normally complain about. So when I get to the bad things, the stuff I didn't like, consider those just aspects of the experience that I thought were missed opportunities to do something different, but I admit there's a couple there that are just things I can't forgive. The second point is I play with the Japanese audio. Why does this matter? Because I hear some folk have issue with the English voice acting. I have no context for that. Plus, using the Japanese VA has some perks. Mainly that sometimes, with my limited understanding of the language, I notice that what's being said is different from what appears in the localized dialogue, and I get a bit of additional context. In addition to that, the Japanese dialogue is far more direct, while the localized performances match the sometimes very flowery text. A perfect example of this is in the Rulers of Zoral. In the localization, we have the Dawn Servant, made of 2 vows, resolve and reason, and the Children of the Promises. In Japanese, you have Ren-O for Dawn Servant. I'm not exactly sure what the correct translation would be, but O means king. Similarly, you don't have vows, you have Bu-O and Ri-O, basically the warrior king and, curiously accurate, king of reason. As for the promises, they're straight up princes. In fact, Wuk Lamat's profile on the FF14 Japanese site lists her as Zoral's Daichiojo, which means first princess, with her siblings listed as first, prince, and second. So it's a lot more direct, far easier to understand the dynamics. Now with that said, let's talk Dawntrail. And if we're going to talk about the story, we're going to talk about the themes, or at the very least the ones I identified. There could be elements here that I missed or went fully over my head. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Now, I won't be doing a deep dive into these themes. That could be a separate video if people want me to do that. But from my own analysis of the storyline, the major themes are trauma, generational trauma in particular, the weight of both expectations and obligations, and in terms of obligations, not general duty, but one for which there is a nice French term, which is noblesse oblige, the obligations of nobility, essentially the ruler's duty. And lastly, of course, family. Zoral and Alexandria both are giant balls of trauma. Both have horrible histories that continue to impact them to this day. Zoral also has the Mamulja, the very image of generational trauma. I'd say poster children, but things get uncomfortable if you mention kids and Mamulja in the same sentence. But generally speaking, Zorali are more about facing those traumas and maybe learn to deal with them, while the Alexandrians are all about looking away from trauma, choosing to forget whatever loss happens and then not even letting go of those that have gone, keeping them around forever. In terms of expectations, every candidate for the throne is weighed down by expectations. Some self-imposed, others very much the product of their upbringing, particularly looking at Bakul and Soralja. Wuk Lamat is surrounded by exceptional people, which puts this notion in her head that it's expected for her to be perfect, to live up to the standard, to prove she's also one of the Doran servant's children. As for noblesse oblige, the burden of obligation, it informs the motivation of the princess. As for why they need to win, what their people need that only they can provide. But it's with the Alexandrians that we see this much clearer, particularly in that Sphene is something of a construct tasked with preserving their people, particularly the Endless. She is duty made manifest. She is the queen's obligation with a personality, and ultimately, she even discards that aspect, becoming just duty. And even before that, you realize when talking to the Endless that they are not all invested in being preserved this way. Some of them even know the situation is untenable, but the system, and thus Sphene's duty, supersedes the will and desires of the people. She will preserve them. The newly departed will be preserved as well, like it or not. It's a twist on the obligations of the ruler, and with Sphene's personality, makes her something of a loving tyrant, which is a really nice concept. Noblesse oblige is also seen in the Dawn servant and the whole Rite of Succession. Hell, the last act of the King of Reason's life is to make this happen, working himself basically to death to ensure all goes as planned. It's also why the head doesn't tell anybody of his brother's death. It's his duty to help his people maintain stability until there's a new ruler. As for family, it's everywhere. From the royal family made of adopted and natural children to dysfunctional families in Mamul, we see families working together and then siblings pit against one another. Tobri the Pelupelu has like 15 kids. He adopted them all and cared for them until they were ready, like Mablu, to set forth on their own journey. And over the course of the story, we become part of Wuk Lamat's family, among many other examples. Hell, one of the biggest emotional moments for me was related to a parent-child situation. I really liked how the themes of Dawntrail inform not just the personalities, but the actions of its characters and the events that transpire. It makes for a cohesive tale where most things make sense. I'm not saying there aren't issues, but overall, I found Dawntrail to weave a coherent story. Moving on. One thing that was evident for me at the end of Endwalker was that the next expansion was not going to be the tale of the Warrior of Light, Champion of Eorzea, the Hero of Destiny, Mr. Hero protagonist. No, we were going to return to our roots of A Realm Reborn, just a random adventurer doing their thing out there for whoever's in need. In this case, it's a princess. I mean, how classic can you get in terms of adventuring than helping a princess in need? Sure, the princess is hardier than most people you know and wields a giant axe, but hey, princess nonetheless. And the whole thing makes sense. We travel to Zoral, which by all intents and purpose is very much isolated from the rest of the world. So they don't know who the hell we are. They don't really care. As far as they're concerned, we're just part of the princess' retinue. That's it. And honestly, after many a story and expansion where everybody pretty much just bonds over the Warrior of Light and sing their praises, it was refreshing to be in a place with no expectations, where we're just nobody and can build a new reputation. It's kind of like the start of Shadowbringers, where the only thing people knew was that we were friends with the Exarch. It's also abundantly clear from the get-go that our role, in that of the Scions with us and with the other prince, is to be a mentor. We're the people who've traveled across creation, and we're with the very young and untested heirs. It's our job to help them mature. Would I have liked a few more instances of this in the story, perhaps course correcting some very bad behavior? Yeah, of course. But sometimes, as in life, you just need someone in your corner to remind you that you've got your own things going for you, that you have your own set of strengths, and nothing comes of putting yourself down. I knew 100% for a fact that the character's role was going to be supported for the entire story the moment Gulul Jaja asked what I thought of Wuk Lamat and asked us to guide her. It's right there. That's why you're here. Still, while people in Zoral may not know who you are, a lot of them still recognize that you are one massive badass. Sometimes just on sight, which funnily enough comes across in some of the conversation options, where you can play up your own badassery. My favorite among them is the solo trial of Wuk Lamat versus Bakul Jaja, where we can tell Bakul that he doesn't need to worry, that the big scary adventurer won't interfere. It's great stuff. Now, with the Warrior of Light out of the way, let's talk about everybody's favorite princess, Wuk Lamat. I love Wuk Lamat. I'll just get that out of the way first. From the moment we meet her, she's a bundle of positive energy. Upbeat, hyperactive, she's a cat with the zoomies. And aside from Erenville, who's snarky as hell towards her, everybody that meets her seems to like her. She's very likable. I know the optimism and positivity rubs some people the wrong way, but not everybody we meet needs to be gloomy. To me, it also helped that her voice in Japanese is what I can only describe as Spitfire anime action girl. Even the VA is full of energy. Also, did you know that the actress in Japanese also played Mapping Way in Endwalker? That was a little surprise for me. I had no issues following Wuk Lamat on her bid. She's sheltered and immature at the start, with only the desire to maintain peace, but not really understanding anything of her people. But she matures along the way, first letting go of that facade of invulnerability, something that wasn't convincing anyone, but she still kept it up because of those expectations. We help her not just to let go of that and ask for help, but also to stop comparing herself to her brothers. I know a lot of people won't agree with what I'm about to say, but the thing I like the most about Wuk Lamat is that she gets it. What her dad wants to teach them with the right. It's why she doesn't fight the shade of her father, but instead insists on learning about the Mamulja, having already picked up that the entire quest is a learning opportunity, and she had already acknowledged her own ignorance. Not only that, but she's the only one of the contestants that, again, gets it. She gets what their ultimate duty is, which is why she's perfectly willing to ignore the right if it means they can help others. It's seen first with Valigarmanda and then with the Mamulja. Even Kona is confused as to why she's asking her competitor, and she doesn't care, because to rule means to also serve the people. This is also then further evidence when she decides the best course of action is to have a second person join her in ruling. Because for all her best intentions, she's well aware she's something of a meathead. So it makes perfect sense to have her brother with her on the throne. Every one of the contestants has something from Gulul Jaja they kinda inherited, but it's also what they focus on to the exclusion of everything else. It's almost like they heard the saga and decided, this is the thing that was most important. This is how Gulul Jaja built this nation. Kona is the brains, Soralja the brawn, Bakul Jaja the heritage. And while Gulul Jaja and his party did kick some butt and had ingenious ideas, and he was a two-headed Mamulja, if you pay attention, the thing that truly won the day and which Wuk Lamat has in spades is empathy. Hell, Gulul Jaja joined the Shabral and the Mamulja with a cookout. Wuk Lamat is all about that. She cares. I mean, I think she says it like 7,000 times. I like this character. Despite her faults and shortcomings, she's very positive and very empathetic. If she didn't get the queen job, she'd be a great motivational speaker. And I love that while traveling with us, and in theory doing all the dungeons, assuming you cleared them with NPCs, she's been leveling up along the way. Which is why she can't match Bakul Jaja at first and then wipes the floor with him. She gets some levels. Past NPCs in other expansions that were more or less in her place were already established warriors, very capable people. So I found it refreshing to have this character grow not just mentally, but also physically. One thing though, she can use limit breaks back to back. That's kind of broken. She may need some nerfs. She's a great contrast for Soralja when they clash. Both rulers, but one puts her people first, and the other puts his ambitions first. I like that Wuk Lamat applies the lessons of the Rite of Succession when interacting with the Alexandrians and the Endless, focusing on learning about them to understand their circumstances, and in the case of the Endless, to respect their culture, to remember them so they're not forgotten when we pull the plug on the entire place. I love the idea behind the first half of the MSQ, the Rite of Succession. Love that it's clear that none of the candidates has what it takes at the start. And though we're told about the purpose of it all when talking to Wuk Lamat, we can easily surmise Gulul Jaja's intent for his other children. After all, he's concerned that his firstborn doesn't have people around him to guide him, to correct him, but instead just has an echo chamber, a sycophant. I can only imagine that he hoped that the journey would soften Soralja, help him care a bit more, to find some of the same empathy that Wuk Lamat has. And maybe that his other boy learned that traditions are not obstacle to progress. Not necessarily. I also like that the mere act of putting them on this Rite of Succession is something that Soralja resents. When we defeat him, he says, "My father left me with nothing." I think he had expected to be the sole heir. I also think that people around him might have filled his head with this notion. After all, Sarilja, about 5 milliseconds before he's sent to that farm upstate, does tell Soralja that with the Golden City, they'll be able to claim his birthright. If there's one thing I wanted to see more of in the Rite of Succession, it's Kulul Jaja's past. I wanted more time with the King of Reason. We don't have anywhere near as much time with him as we should. Not saying that I dislike the Warrior King, I find him delightful. I want to be an old man with his sense of humor and joy for life itself. I can only imagine, had he not died, everybody would have seen him chill on the beach while his children took care of the country, having pina coladas with Urianger and Kadenrem. In terms of all the things we do, the highlight for me is the really charming trade sequence in Huachumpelo. I really want that trade and bartering bit of gameplay to get a bigger part in the expansion. Maybe as part of some tribe quest or something like that. Add some chance of failure and means of optimization, and you know there will be people losing their minds over some spreadsheets. A part of me wants to see the community do what they did with the island, the simple bartering. Wuk Lamat is our main character of focus, but it doesn't mean this expansion is all about her. There's a lot of focus on our dear Pikachu enthusiast Kryle and Alisaie. Kryle, obvious, she's got ties to the main plot. Her origins come into focus, and she's determined throughout the experience to prove herself worthy to stand with the other Scions. In fact, if you talk to her before any of the duties, she seems to grow increasingly exasperated, reminding you that she can hold her own. As for Alisaie, I just noticed that in this storyline she took charge. She's the one who gets Wuk Lamat to go and rest after the attack on Tuliolol, then sending Oz to bed as well. She stands with Wuk Lamat in the throne room when Soralja attacks. She's highlighted as the one fighting the enemies invading. She finds the body of the mechanical soldier and so on. It gets to the point that when the culling of Solution 9 is underway, she's the one giving field orders to the other Scions. And it's a great bit of growth and continuation from her frustrations in Endwalker that the Warrior of Light had to be the one to carry the heavy burdens. This is Alisaie stepping up, doing what she said, sharing that burden. I like it and I want to see more of it. I also want her and her brother to get an attire change for the rest of Dawntrail. I come from a tropical country, and being in full leather is not what I would call recommended. I can only imagine she loved getting to what I'm thinking is a temperature-controlled city in Solution 9. As for the other Scions, they're more in the background, that's fine. They had a prominent role in the story in Shadowbringers and Endwalker. It's time to give them a little break. I'm sure in the coming patches, Y'shtola will have her chance to shine. We're talking different reflections and interdimensional travel. You know she's gonna be all over this. Oh, and we need Shale to join the Scions. With everything more or less sorted with Oblivion, she's gonna need something to do. And it will be interesting to have someone with technological skills join the Scions. Maybe the Ironworks. And you know, she is with the group when we return at the end of the MSQ. So, Shale for the Scions? Yes. This expansion probably has the best battle content so far. Every solo duty is incredibly fun and has really nice mechanics. I enjoyed fighting the Elder Kulul Jaja and loved that it's a preamble to show you his moves before the real fight in Mamuk. Wuk Lamat vs Bakul Jaja is awesome. Took me a couple of tries, I got a case of the tunnel vision, and didn't remember to do my combos to heal. Second time around was a different story altogether. And then that fight with Otis is straight up dungeon or even trial quality. It's so good. And speaking of dungeons and trials, they are awesome, and what I like the most is the difficulty level increases progressively. The first dungeon, Ihuikatumu, is very forgiving but already throws some curveballs at you. Workor Sormor adds a bit more challenge, same with the Cenote, and then Vanguard and Orogenics turn the difficulty up. I love the bullet hell boss in Vanguard in particular. And then Alexandria humbled me. I didn't expect these bosses to kick my butt as thoroughly as I did, but I was having so much fun. And that's just the MSQ dungeons, not counting the superb Skyborough Deadwalk and Tender Valley. You know, world's strongest Cactuar. As much as I like Endwalker, the dungeons were on the easy side, but in Dawntrail they're very much in line with what Yoshi P said before and during the press tour, that they were looking to bring some of that challenge back. And by God, they did, with new interesting mechanics, crazier patterns, and sometimes some unforgiving damage. And it's the same with the trials. Valley Garmanda has some awesome mechanics, very creative, but it's not really that difficult. But Everkeep and then the Interfoss really bring it. And I can't wait to do these in Extreme, especially Interfoss when it releases in a patch or two. I want to see what more that trial has to offer. I'm actually wondering if the wall section will have more parts to it. I love that mechanic, it was so creative. One thing I've read as being a recurring complaint with Dawntrail is how much it takes before the first fight. And I don't mean duty, I mean an objective that tells you to go kick something in the teeth. I don't really care that much about that. I'm an RPG guy and a tabletop RPG guy. I can go with entire sections of just talking. So this didn't really bother me, but I do have to acknowledge that the time spent before you cast your first skill has been increasing. I went back and looked at the streamer's playthrough of past expansions, trying to measure time before the first fight. Shadowbringers, it was about an hour and a half. Endwalker was about 3 hours. As for Dawntrail, it depends. If you go to Wachumpelu first, it's like 4-ish, maybe 5 hours. But if you go to Kosamauka first, it's kind of like Endwalker, 3-ish hours. But with so many people commenting on it, I wonder if the time will now go down a bit. As I said, Dawntrail is experimental and they are looking for feedback to course correct. I really liked Alexandria, mostly because it's messed up. The whole thing of 30 years passing inside the dome, between it being erected and the attack happening, or Vanguard being built, essentially before the worlds are connected, was a big surprise. And I quite like that for Soralja, all this time went by and he thought he was coming to Zoral to destroy his siblings, but instead found his dad still alive. Solution 9 is delightful to look at. I wish there was more to do in the city, but I get the feeling we're gonna be adding a lot more in the patches of content. But the place is visually stunning. I can't wait to head into the big Nvidia card, the Arcadion. I like Zoral a lot. Nice mix of mountainous regions, desert, and straight up rainforests. Yaktel and Urkopacha were my favorites because of those elements of visual storytelling they have, like the scars left on the land by the conflicts between the Shibral and the Mamulja, or the places where Valigarmanda's flames still burn. Those are pretty cool. I quite like that. Plus, the more bountiful regions are quite beautiful to look at too. I like the different clans, they have a lot of personality. Their cultures, though we haven't fully explored some of them, are pretty interesting. My favorites so far are the Pelu Pelu. At first glance, they're Final Fantasy Ferengi, but looking closer you find a culture that values bonds and fairness and honesty. Everybody tells you, the Pelu Pelu will not swindle you. In fact, one of the side quests for Either Currents is the start of a chain about a Pelu Pelu merchant being taken advantage of by an Eorzean trader. The Pelu Pelu may be straight arrows, but Eorzeans can be very scummy. Alexandrians horrified me. With a whole casual mention of, oh, I ran out of souls. Like, oh, I'm fresh out of pennies. It's horrible and it's twisted and I really like it. That extends, of course, to the nightmare fuel that is the Endless. I have my issues with the Endless, but the concept of you can't even go away in death because your memories are trapped in the system. That kind of horror is, well, it's pretty nice. Similarly on the I like dark twists, the whole situation with the Mamulja. It adds a lot of context to Bakul's actions and motivations, but it's a horrific situation. It's a horrible act hoping for a better future, which is the kind of twisted morality moments I'm all about. I like Soralja as a bad guy. He's intimidating, he's vicious, and he's consistent. And I kinda understand how he got to be the way he is, and it takes me back to those expectations. After all, he's obsessed with proving himself not just his father's successor, but also the miracle. We all know the two-headed Mamulja are 1 in 100, and they're all supposed to be infertile, and yet Soralja was born. He is, by medical and biological standards, a miracle. And I don't think anyone ever let him forget that. Do you think he gave himself the title, the Resilient Son? He's likely been reminded of that his entire life. And so that fighting prowess he has is likely just him doing his damnedest to live up to the legend that is Kulul Jaja and what everyone expects of his natural-born son. It's why when he loses to the shade of his dad, he loses his cool and attempts to attack the person in charge of the trial. He can't fail. He can't accept failure. He has to succeed. Which then explains why he goes to the lengths he goes, and is also likely why he doesn't really have many fuzzy feelings for his family. With everything that he's supposed to do and how he's obsessed as a result, he likely sees them as being in his way, and is that the final obstacle? Which is why he doesn't just conquer Zoral straight away, but waits for Wuk Lamat to come to him. He has to set a stage to prove he's superior, to make it public knowledge that he is the miracle, that he is what everyone expected him to be. It's all pride. His pride was once hurt, and so he's doing all he can so it doesn't happen again. I can dig that. In fact, I have a feeling that even had he succeeded, he would not have been happy about it. If he had come at the other side of his obsession, he probably would have realized all he lost, all he sacrificed. And I have to wonder, would that Zoral have remembered, realized, or even acknowledged that he had a son? Because the one we meet barely recognizes the kid and doesn't seem to care all that much about him. This is the first time since I started playing FF14 where I am excited to go back to the different zones and do some side quests. The Ether Current quests are all story seeds. They're the first entry into a quest chain, and they're all interesting tales. From the aforementioned Pelu Pelu being swindled to a potsworn trying to give back to the Moblin caretaker but struggling because the thing she loves the most in the world seems to be the crafter himself. There are more avenues to discover new aspects of the different cultures in Zoral. I love the Mamuja couple asking me for help with a problem and then letting me know there's more to the situation, but the husband is reticent to ask for our help and even more so to say thank you. It made me laugh, and I'm definitely going back to them to see just what's going on. In that sense, Dawntrail really knocks it out of the park. The side quests really are intriguing. The previous expansions of Final Fantasy XIV never failed to affect me emotionally, even bring me to tears. For the most part, Dawntrail moved me. I found moments heartwarming, others funny, and then some truly heartbreaking. But it was the last zone that truly brought me to tears. While meeting her parents was so sweet, I got a bit teary-eyed. But the thing that really broke me was Erenville. And here's the thing, I know this is not going to be the same experience for everybody. This is particularly based on my own experiences. But Erenville's struggle to accept what's going on and to let go resonated with me like nothing had ever before. I lost my dad about 15 years ago and I still miss him. I can't even talk much about him without my voice starting to shake. As the questline played out in front of me, I could only question what I would do in Erenville's place. And honestly, hand over my heart, I don't know if I could let go of my dad a second time. And in Erenville's case, it's so awful that because of the world fusion, he lost years with his mother. Same way I lost years with my dad because of disease. So that entire sequence and conversation leading up to shutting down that station really broke me. But I can understand how it probably won't resonate with everybody. Then there's Namika's death. It didn't move me, but instead sent my mind into a conspiratorial spiral as I wondered if the memory loss was the reason everybody seemed so happy. If the regulators, much like the name would imply, also regulated them, removing any memories of being unhappy or dissenting. Now, they didn't just remove memories of the deceased, but also kept them in line. I distrusted Sphene so much that I thought that was the case, and I'm still not convinced it wasn't. Good old Jar Jar is the death of a father, so with all I said before, you can assume that affected me a bit. Not to tears, but it did move me. What nearly brought me to tears, though, was the revelation that the King of Reason had died. I think a lot of people guessed that he was gone. I had gone in another direction. I had assumed he was playing possum, keeping quiet, but keeping an eye on everything. And it was the notion of having someone so close to you dying and having to carry them around for 3 more years, not being able to hear their voice anymore, but having that presence with you at all times. I felt so bad for the character. So yeah, at least in terms of the feelings, Dawntrail continues Final Fantasy XIV's streak of making me cry. Now, it can't all be positive. There were things I didn't like and I debated whether to mention them. In working on the many videos on this channel, I've come to prefer to focus on the positives and not the negatives. But as this is something of a retrospective, I need to do what I did with the Legacy of Kain games. I need to be thorough in my recounting of my experience. I have to talk about the bad bits. And it's a few items. I know a lot of people hated traveling with Wuk Lamat and not being the main character of the story. The only point in the game where I had a similar feeling was the Gunslinger questline in Shaktura. I didn't understand why we had to go through such a roundabout way of doing things when I could just storm the bandits and wipe them out. Erenville stopped you and goes, no, if you do it, you'll get in trouble with the law. And I'm like, and? I fought gods. You really think some cops are gonna be a problem for me? Besides, I'm part of the group that got the new queen on the throne. I don't think I have to worry all that much about legal matters, especially not with her nursemaid testifying that I did it to get a gift from the queen back from the bandits. I found that entire questline pointless, just padding before we get to the rail station. Not to mention, I dislike the ginger idiot we're stuck with. I'm not a fan of the theme songs, and when I finished the MSQ, I hated the ending theme. Smile just sounded like the singer, Akino, was strangling cats. She sounded so off-key. It was painful. Weird because I know she's a great performer. I've heard many of her songs outside of Final Fantasy XIV. And she is the singer of the frankly banger raid song Scream from Endwalker. But it felt like she was struggling with the notes. Curiously, as I wrote this, I listened to Smile again on YouTube and didn't find it pleasant. But I could swear the in-game version sounded awful. I also don't like the times when they use the song as an insert, first during the coronation and then bafflingly during the train montage, where the section they use for the song is not even as long as the montage, so it's played for a few seconds and then you're back to instrumental music. With all that said, the choir I like. The choir in Smile kills it. As for the Dawntrail theme song, I don't like it. I hate the distortion effect they use for Koji's voice. It just makes the song sound bad. And the Primal section and the Amanda Aiken sections don't match up at all. Like they're two different songs, poorly mashed up. The song didn't click with me, that's all. And it's just the theme songs. The in-game music is awesome. So I did think they overused the Dawntrail motif a bit too much. Or simply I was more aware of it than I was in past expansions. Now this might be just me, but I felt the pacing of the second half of the MSQ was a bit off. Getting to Solution 9 takes forever, and I honestly thought that Everkeep was the end of it all. With how it's paced and how much build-up there is for Soralja versus Fiend, when Everkeep ended and we kick off the final section, I thought, oh, there's more? I was genuinely surprised there was more content remaining. On a related note to the second half is the death of Kulul Jaja. Why is everybody standing around? Hell, why is the invasion just a cutscene? That would have been a great solo duty, fighting in the streets, trying to get to the palace, and then confronting Soralja, killing him, and then he revives and goes buck wild and it forces Kulul Jaja to step in to protect us and gets killed. Or maybe you see the entire thing happening through the echo because you were outside fighting to save the people along with the other Scions. That would have been better than everyone just standing around watching him get killed. In fact, there's a lot of standing around doing nothing when some matter of duty or gameplay could have enhanced the scenes and the story. Another example is the train ride crash into Vanguard. I wanted that shoot 'em up as gameplay, not a cutscene. And we already have a first-person shoot 'em up in the Golden Saucer. They could have used the same interface. I found it impossible to like or empathize with Fiend. She's just too obviously a villain. I can analyze her behavior and understand what she's all about all day, but she's just instantly shady and way too giddy in the face of all the turmoil for us to trust anything she says, and it's very obvious that she's lying or hiding a bunch of stuff. So the big reveal of her being evil is not much of a reveal at all. But Kulul Jaja's redemption arc is something that should have been a seed planted in MSQ, looking to expand in the 7.x content. One, the guy has way too much trauma and has committed way too many crimes to simply do a 180. He doesn't even pay for releasing Valigarmanda. Paced out over the expansion would have given that story time to mature. While I like the Endless in the sense of the twisted version of their culture of remembrance and how it connects to Fiend's whole ruler's duty theme that I mentioned before, the Endless and Living Memory feel, much like the final trial, like a retread of old ground. Specifically, Emmet Selk, Amarod, and that whole deal. The thing is, we've been dealing with dead people and dead worlds far too long now. If this is truly a new beginning for a new set of stories, we need to change it up a bit. And Living Memory is basically reverse Ultima Thule. It doesn't help that the Endless themselves are not really all that invested in keeping on. And since we all agree that their existence is pretty much abhorrent, there's no real moral quandary to turning them off. Except, of course, for Erenville's mom, who is just too damn awesome. Not to mention, these are not real people, they're just memories of them. They're cardboard cutouts, they're PDF documents. The real people they were are already gone. We know this from Otis. Otis is dead. What we see in Living Memory is a backup. So again, aside from Kafka, I really don't feel anything shutting them down. And continuing with Living Memory, I don't know what this final zone is used for moving forward. We turned it off, it's final. There's nothing there. Even the extra dungeon makes it clear that the few stragglers will be vanishing soon. so I don't see how living memory will be part of the post-patch content. Not to mention that the area looked interesting before, but now it's just gray and bland. Now, speaking of the ending, it's said that the Alexandrians were sad and distraught by the news of Sphinx's death, but found solace in that their way of life would not be changing, which means that they're going to continue using souls as a commodity. Great, love that. Now this one's gonna sound cruel, but what's the point of Gululja? The little boy really truly doesn't matter. They could have used him to give Soralja some humanizing qualities. Maybe despite being our villain, despite being so motivated to destroy us all, he was a good dad, adding a bit more emotional conflict to taking him out. But no, kid's abandoned, Soralja doesn't pay him any mind, and I'm still wondering, who's his mom? Who has enough bad taste and need for bad decisions and copious amounts of alcohol to get busy with Soralja? It just feels like the kid is there for some cheap attempts at making you feel something. I didn't care. I mean, he's cute. He's the baby Yoda of Dawntrail, that's for sure. But as part of the story, he really doesn't matter. But he may be one of those threads that gets pulled on in a long while, so we'll see. I'm sad to say that the writing is much simpler this time around, likely due to the new writers in charge. But a lot of the nuance and moral ambiguity that we got in the Ishikawa days is largely absent in Dawntrail. Bad guys are clearly bad. They keep to their themes, and that doesn't make them morally complex. I spoke of Soralja already, but he's just bad from the get-go and doesn't get anything in the way that makes you think, oh, maybe he has a point. Maybe we're not getting it. And I've already said enough about Sphene. There are exceptions, of course. The Mamulja situation and the Alexandrians' way of life are more complex, but overall, things are much more clear-cut compared to prior expansions. Oh, I hate the name Unlost World. That's it. I got nothing more to say. I just hate the name. It's stupid. One more thing. For as much as I like Wuk Lamat and as much as I like the trials, I didn't like Lamachi just appearing at the end of the Interforce trial. And it's because of what I said before. It feels like a retread. This case, the Endsinger fight, where the last section is just avoiding some AoEs and killing the boss, with all other mechanics gone. Plus, before the fight starts, Wuk Lamat, Trial, and Grahati are all removed. So if the loss of control from the boss is what gives Wuk Lamat the opportunity to break into the arena, I wanted the other two to show up as well. Just feel that would have made a lot of sense. What would I have done? Add them to the party so we go up to 11, and then just do a final phase with some added mechanics that kept the challenge going. Oh, this expansion left me with questions, with plots and schemes and machinations to consider. I know they said they're just trying stuff out, so we don't know which threats they'll pick up to push forward, but there are a lot of things I'm contemplating. First up, I have a very strong feeling that traveling between reflections is going to be the core moving forwards. Between Dawntrail, Shadowbringers, and just regular old Source, we've seen 3 versions of Grenoble, the blacksmith, and this time around we meet the alternates of the trolley guys. So the other reflections and the alternates have to be part of the stories moving forward. Can you imagine Ishtora meeting the Runar of the Source? That would be super interesting. We already know some of the content will involve traveling to other worlds for the Gatherers and the Crafters. Are these related to the worlds destroyed by Meteon? Or are we going to other reflections? Are we rebuilding Alexandria? And that's the use for living memory from now on? Are we revitalizing an entire world? What of the Ballsia-like content? Where could that take us? Here's a philosophical one for you, one that stuck with me at the end of the story. Are Sphene's actions evil? Is she a bad gal? She was all for consuming our world, but in the end, she's just a set of memories slapped on top of a set of system directives to preserve the Alexandrian people. Meaning she has no free will, she is bound by the system. So are her actions her own, or something she's compelled to do? I couldn't trust Sphene even for a second, but I wonder how much of what we see is the Queen's memories and how much is the system talking through her. Let you ponder that one. You can think of her as being RoboCop, a very extreme version of RoboCop, like the RoboCop in RoboCop 2 that has like 700 different directives that can't let him act. Another thing with the Alexandrians, what's going on with the Preservation? They mention the Preservation as an organization so many times that for a moment, I thought I was playing Honkai Star Rail. But beyond mentions, we don't see any of its members. Are they all gone? Do some remain and will be our antagonists? Moving forward, given that we shut down their endless amusement park, are we getting a follow-up on Kryl's story? Are we following up on her people? They're supposedly originally from the South Sea Isles, and Emmett Selk did mention them at the end of Endwalker. We've been going everywhere on Emmett's bingo card lately, so we gotta head there, right? Maybe a variant dungeon? Where are the rest of Zoral just royal guard? We killed one of them and he killed another, but surely he has to have more. Will they attend a coup? It's a loose threat for sure. I'm putting this next item under questions and not just something bad, because there has to be an answer, and it's why do we need a permit to go to Shaktural? They make it seem like everybody needs a pass. Does that mean even the people from that part of the nation need permits to come into the city? Why? What secret, aside from the ceruleum, is Shaktural hiding? If it's never addressed, I might have to move this point to the downsides, but as I said, I'm being open-minded and giving them a chance. And the final question, and the bigger one, why does the key from the Golden City bear the symbol of Azem? Same little sun with a ring that we see on Azem's crystal. That's a really important question. Now, I'm fairly certain I'm not in the majority when it comes to my views of the MSQ. Its characters and events. I had fun, lots of it, I still have fun, as I said before. If your experience is different, please let me know in the comments. Just, even if you vehemently disagree with me, keep it civil. I look forward to how this summer vacation continues with the Warrior of Light and his ensemble cast. Really interested in future stories, and for me that includes the little plotline started with the Ether Current quests. I'll be back with another video soon covering the Deliver quest, the Role quest, and which duties and fights are my favorites. Until then, walk in the light of the crystals, and see you next time.